All right, so let's look at Japan before 1868. Um, the reason why we're looking at Japan before this year hits, there's a significance to this year because a lot of things end up changing after this year for Japan. They end up changing their system. But it's important for us to look at the system before this because we want to be able to make comparisons between the old system and the new system and what led that new system um, linking up with Germany and Italy right before World War II and, what they did during World War II. All right. So, Japan before 1868, quick background. In theory, Japan was ruled by an emperor, but the reality was that Japan was, actually ruled by the military government known as the shogunate. The system was known as a feudal system. It looks very similar to that of what you could find in Europe during, the feudal system in Europe, but, there are some differences, and we will be looking at those differences. But for our sakes, for Japan right now, they had a military hierarchy that existed, and basically land was given to high-ranking individuals in exchange for military services. Powerful people who owned land had the military protection. So at the time, the group that had the most power within all these shogunate groups was the Tokugawa. They were the dominant military group. So you had more than one military group, the Tokugawa being the head of that. We're going to get into two other groups that try to kind of mess with the Tokugawa, and we'll see how that turns out. So Japan's military hierarchy, you can picture this as a triangle where you have the emperor at the top, but they have no power. Instead, you have the shogun who actually have the power. They hold the real power, the military power, the political, and they control basically all the land. And I'll say this a million times, land is power. And because the Tokugawa basically, they had a lot of land. And because of that, they had a lot of power and they had a lot of protection and they had a lot of force. And it was really hard to kind of basically deal with them because they were so strong. Below the shogun in rank, so emperor slash shogun, emperor fake power, shogun real power. Then you have the daimyo. They are the overlords that were given land by the shogun in exchange for their loyalty. Right below the daimyo, you have the samurai group, which we all know, we're very familiar with what a samurai is, but the fighters, right? Um, they were also given land by either daimyo or the shogun in exchange for their loyalty and military protection. These individuals were very skilled fighters and they knew exactly what they were doing. And because of that, people wanted their skills, which was protection. Protect me. Allow me to live the life that I want to live and do what it is that I want to do and make sure nobody messes with me. And in exchange, I'm gonna make sure that you're taken care of too. And that's how like the system basically was working, and they worked for each other. Um, so there's that. And then right below the samurai, you have the peasants who basically were working the land in exchange. They received protection and they were allowed to basically relatively live a somewhat safe life as long as they were doing what it is that they were doing and safe given, the current time period that they were living in. But protection from basically pirates and other bad samurai that might want to mess with them, rob them, kill them, whatever. Right below the peasants, you have the merchant class, and they were pretty wealthy. But then you might ask, like, wait, why are the merchants the ones? Why aren't they at the very least above the peasants? Well, that's because in this Japanese philosophy that we're looking at, um, they valued productivity, and merchants didn't really embody that. Peasants did, because you have the peasant class that's being very productive in its term, in terms of like the labor that they're giving to work the land. And so that was more valued than what merchants were doing. That's going to change. And you'll see why exactly that rank change, that hierarchy change. And that's very evident when we go in and even further into history with Japan. So with this next slide, so the system is working, but then all of a sudden it's not working and it starts to crumble. Why is that happening? Why do we see this breakdown in Japan? Well, the population begins to grow. And when that happens, you need more land, you need more resources, you need more food, you need more goods. who can come in and fulfill, the food and the goods? Merchant class. So the merchant class starts to grow in importance, and then they start to get more money, um, which starts to change things. All at the same time that this is happening, where the merchant class is rising up, you see the samurai basically getting a little bit weaker and more vulnerable because of the fact that they're in debt and they had to do, attend to imperial court. They had other matters to attend to. They're in debt and they have other matters to attend to. Therefore, they're weakened. Other shogunate clans start to rise up. Your book doesn't really go into detail why exactly they're rising up, but yes, they're rising up. And the same thing, they don't go into detail why the samurai have to attend imperial court, but they're rising up. The other shogunate clans, I'm not even going to attempt to say their names, and they try to find an opportunity to challenge the dominant shogunate group, the Tokugawa, right? Which they're going to have their opportunity. But point is, Japan's system is weak. When you have a weakness in the system, it becomes vulnerable, right? Somebody at some point is going to take advantage of that. And guess who does that? We have the impact of the West on Japan, specifically the United States. Um, the United States comes in, and they're going to be the ones who take advantage of that. So we have this individual. His name is Commodore Perry. Fun fact: his first name is Matthew, and his last name is Perry. Matthew Perry, same name as a guy who plays Chandler Bing in the show off Friends. Just wanted you guys to know, throwing that out there. Anyway, so Commodore Perry comes in. Before 1868, though, before he comes in, the Japan was isolated. They have their system of hierarchy, military hierarchy, right? But at the same time, they're very isolated. They're like minding their own business, kind of not messing with anybody. Like, don't mess with me, and I won't mess with you. Leave me alone. I just want to be left alone. Very like teenage emo type vibes. But Perry comes in, knocking on their door, basically, hey, I'm here to trade. And I got this letter from this guy. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's the president of the United States. He's a pretty big deal, President Fillmore, even though nobody knows who he is anymore nowadays. But anyways, at the time, he's like, yeah, I have this like letter from the president, basically saying like, hey, trade with us, and we're demanding. But Japan was like, no, thank you. Specifically, he went to the emperor for this, demanding the emperor. And I want you to think about, why is that a mistake? Why did Commodore Perry make a mistake in asking the emperor? So, think about that. And obviously the answer is going to be in the next slide, but negotiations are unsuccessful. A couple of reasons why. Um, the Japanese couldn't, there was very little Japanese people who could actually speak English. And again, Perry went to the emperor. He doesn't hold the power, therefore he has no power to actually negotiate. The shoguns are the ones who actually have the power to negotiate. So he made a mistake. He didn't know that. So from the outside perspective, it seems like the emperor has power in this system, but it's really not that, right? And so that's part of the reason why. Also, Japan just didn't want to do this. Japan just didn't want to trade. They wanted to be left alone. They were kind of skeptical of like any like outsiders coming in and trying to change them and all of that. So there's that. But anyways, Commodore Perry comes back again. He leaves, he comes back, and he's like, all right, we still want to trade, and we're going to force you to trade. I came with all of these ships, and all my ships are stocked up with heavy firepower. You don't have that, but we do. And then he starts firing off all these like cannons, basically, and he's showing off all the power that the United States has, specifically the U.S. Navy. And he's saying, you're going to do this, and you're going to let us trade with you. And you don't want to basically resist us, because it's not going to be a smart move, because you don't have the power that we have, and we're going to destroy you guys. So you either say yes now and avoid basically having your people die, or you say no and your people die. Japan was basically left with no other choice but to basically say yes. So they signed this treaty. Basically, and they allow the United States to trade and give further trading rights to the U.S. The person that ended up signing the treaty with the United States ends up, getting assassinated. That's how controversial this was. So Now you have this new system that's going to get triggered, because let's keep it real. Japan was embarrassed by the fact that they were bullied into all of this, into opening their borders. This left Japan feeling, ashamed and embarrassed and basically concerned. What's going to happen in the future when somebody else, if somebody else comes in, and they going to be able to do this to us again? Are we just going to have to like basically do whatever it is that they want? And they've decided that that was not going to be the case. They don't want to be a colony. Instead, they want to be equal power to the United States or to other powerful Western countries that we're going to be looking at. They want to match up and they want to have respect. They were disrespected, and basically they want to change that. And we're going to be looking at that within the next few lectures. Maybe not so much today, but we will be looking at what exactly they did to try and attempt to get that respect. So one of the first things that they decided was they needed to industrialize and modernize their government. Um, how exactly do you modernize a government? So they replaced the samurai with a well-equipped army. Instead of having them carry swords, they're going to start carrying guns and basically doing what it is that they need to do. And it makes sense, right? Guns will beat swords. And if anybody tries to invade Japan, they're not going to be able to stand up to anybody that brings guns. So let's train these individuals, have them bring guns, or, learn how to use guns and shoot them. And we'll be really good and powerful. And eventually we'll grow and be as powerful as the United States. Um, there's some groups that were in favor of this, some groups that were not. At the same time, you have the emperor who dies, and so there's this new young 15-year-old emperor Meiji who steps in, and basically he's a kid, right? He's a high schooler, the same age as you high schoolers, right? He's going to be easily influenced by these other shogun groups, the ones that I had mentioned or didn't refuse to mention earlier. Basically, they see this as opportunity to grab him and influence him, and they want to use this opportunity to overthrow the Tokugawa. So that's what they end up trying to do. Both of these clans challenge the, samurai, the Bakufu, with the modern army, and the Tokugawa basically gave up their power. There is a civil war because the Tokugawa tries to come back, but that doesn't end up working out for them. The civil war ends up in defeat of the samurai, so the samurai is no more. You know, the emperor's power is restored once again, and it seems like they're going backwards, but even though they are giving power back to the emperor, they are introducing a new government system at the same time, one that kind of mimics ones that you'd find in Europe, or one that would look a little bit closer to that of the United States, with the exception of the fact that Japan has an emperor. But that's something that we're going to be looking at pretty soon within the next few classes that we attend together. And then obviously, if you have any questions, you let me know, and that should be it. All right. Peace out, guys.